Valentin Maximoff taught me that even when you're feeling sad, you can't just stop living your life.
Hey guys, Chase Masterson here with Superhero IRL, coming to you today with Joe Gatto, Jameela Jamil, the Justice League, and you. A look at the stories we love and why we love them and how to harness their power in our own lives. First up, we bring you Joe Gatto.
Hi, everybody. Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Joe.
I'm excited to be here. If you don't know me from Impractical Jokers or Impractical Jokers, the movie, or the Misery Index, you may know me from my Be Kind modeling t-shirt days, where I wore the Be Kind t-shirt and pointed. I'm the official spokesperson of the Be Kind merch, which I'm happy to wear. It's such a pleasure to be here and be part of this. So thank you so much, everyone, for having me here. I have been working with the coalition for I think it's creeping up on almost a decade now. And it's been nothing but phenomenal and so rewarding. My first experiences with them were at speaking on panels at Comic-Cons, and then getting more involved in the organization as we helped fundraise to build this curriculum that they've taken out and helped so many people. So just to watch them grow from this little, I think the first panel room I was in, I think had 15 to 20 people at the first Comic-Con that I crashed. And then just to be at one where there was standing room only, and just to see the impact that it's had. So congratulations to everybody involved. And the Be Kind message is very important to me. I have taken it as a badge of honor. And a story that I like to tell about Be Kind, actually, it means so much to me because one of my very good friends early in my life during my formative years was very kind to me in a moment of loneliness, sadness, mental instability. And I think it's very important to tell this story. So I try to as much as I can. So when I was 12 years old, I grew up with a friend, Jason Joseph. He was my next door neighbor, and we had connecting backyards, two biggest yards in Staten Island, and everybody would come there to play all the time. And Jason, as he grew older, he got better at sports and social activity and funnier, and I got better at like math and science and being a little bit geekier, and I was a good bowler. So I had all these things going for me. So we kind of separated ways in the neighborhood, to where Jason would have all of our friends in the yard playing football, and I would be basically alone in my yard. And we had a little 4-foot chain link fence that separated our yards. And I wanted, for my 12th birthday so bad, I was very much into like Dungeons and Dragons, and Willow was my favorite movie, if you know what I'm speaking of. And I wanted this toy called Pipeworks. And I got this Pipeworks set where it's basically just PVC pipe with connectors that you could build whatever you'd like. And the first thing in the booklet was a sword and a shield, and it told you how to build that. And I was like, okay, I'm going to build a sword and shield. So I'm in my backyard and I build a sword and shield, and Jason is playing football with about 6 or 8 guys in his yard. And I start with my imagination to do some imagination play. And I get into this epic battle with a 2-headed dragon with my sword and shield. And, he has me backed up against a cave, and I'm using my magical powers. And in my mind, I was the coolest thing ever. But in reality, I'm this lanky 12-year-old, like running around my backyard. And you know that feeling when you feel somebody watching you? And I felt that feeling, and I looked over to the chain link fence, and there was just 6 guys on the chain link fence just looking at me and being like, what is this kid doing? And I turned beet red. And Jason said to me, Joe, what are you doing? And I was like, nothing. I turned beet red, and I tried to turn tail and go away. And he's like, Joe, no, what are you doing? And I was like, there's just this dragon. I'm just in the middle of this epic battle right now. It's nothing. He's got me, he's got a freeze ray. And, and I explained to Jason what happened. And Jason said, do you need help? And I just smiled and I said, yeah. And he hopped the fence and he grabbed some Pipeworks and made a bow staff. And together we kicked that dragon's butt. And that summer was one of the best summers of my life, because every day from dusk to dawn, we played these adventure games where I would narrate these mystical stories using these Pipeworks. And I would have anywhere from 2 to 16 kids from dusk till dawn in my yard. So just by a friend asking, do you need help? And that little bit of kindness changed my life forever. So I try to do that going forward. I try to make people laugh. I live to make people laugh. And I'm just happy to be part of this program to do that. Thanks.
Thanks again, Joe. Our next segment is on resilience, and we have 3 pop culture fluent clinical psychologists for you. You probably know them, starting with Dr. Andrea Letamendi is the acting director of the UCLA Resilience Center. She is an adjunct professor of psychology at Chapman University. She's the host of the Arkham Sessions podcast and one of the co-creators of the Heroic Journey curriculum. It's wonderful to have you here, Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
Thank you so much for having me at such a vital event. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Dr. Janina Scarlett has an additional doctorate in neuroscience as well as psychology. A Ukrainian-born refugee, she survived Chernobyl radiation and persecution. She immigrated to the United States at the age of 12 with her family, and later, inspired by the X-Men, developed superhero therapy to help patients with anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Among other books, Dr. Scarlett has authored Little Brown book groups, Superhero Therapy, Therapy Quest, and the upcoming Super Survivors on navigating mental health issues in the eve of COVID. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Janina Scarlett.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much. There's so much to say in all of your bios. We're also honored to have Janina as one of the co-creators of the Heroic Journey curriculum. And we are so proud to have Dr. Rita Walker. Dr. Walker is the author of The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. She is a tenured professor at the University of Houston. Her work has been seen on Good Morning America and so much more. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Rita Walker.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. We are excited to hear you, and please take it away.
Well, one of the reasons I'm happy to be here is because of this immense opportunity to bring science and expertise and merge that with an everyday audience and an everyday conversation, because it's so incredibly important for us to realize our strengths and to realize our resilience. I've been a university professor for the better part of 2 decades. And one of the things that I have walked away from my work knowing is that resilience is not about, how many times we get knocked down or what the things are that knocks us down, that includes racism, that includes racial violence, that includes sexism and how women are mistreated in our society. It doesn't necessarily include just the things that happen to us, at work, and lots of things happen at work. For those of us who live in cities where there's lots of traffic, all the frustrations that happen in traffic, there are so many things that happen that are incredibly out of our control. And where I would like for us to spend our time, and where I've spent a lot of my research, is trying to understand what are the factors that allow the person who gets knocked down to get back up. Like, what is it about that individual? Is it, something that they learned from their parents? Like, this is just who we are and what we do. Is it something about their sense of faith or their spirituality? There was a reference to George Floyd. For Black people in our society, Black folks have been struggling for generations. And yet there's this tremendous sense of can do, no matter what. Where does that come from? And it's really important for us to understand and assess what are the factors for various individuals that they're somehow able to tap into at that moment when they're struggling the most. And I appreciate, Larissa's comment in which she said earlier on another panel, there was, let's stop being reactive and trying to be more proactive. And I try to capitalize on that, especially in our clinical work. In addition to being a university professor, I'm licensed as a clinical psychologist. And so I supervise our clients, or I supervise patients. And one of the things that we try to communicate to them is, well, let's figure out where your strengths are. Let's figure out how we can maximize in the things that you're good at. Because when we get distracted by the things that knock us down, Scarface, who is part of the, rap group in Houston, Gatto Boys, said your mind will play tricks on you. Your mind will distract you and make you think all those awful things that happen are you. But instead, if we can foster an environment and foster more conversations where we focus on individual strengths, that gets us, in a lot of ways, it gets us to the places where we're supposed to be. And it gets us to the places that we're put on this planet in order to be able to achieve.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walker. Yes, it is so incredibly important that that we harness the tools that we have at our disposal. If you would, tell us more about your work to bring the Unapologetic Guide to Black Health to communities. I understand that you're putting out, well, you have an incredible YouTube channel. We love hearing you. Tell me more about your work to expand this work and to make this crucial mental health set of tools available to as many people as possible.
Well, the thing that is most important, I think, is that every individual be able to assess on a moment to moment, day to day, decade to decade, to be able to assess where we are. Where am I right now? How am I doing? An important part of what psychologists do is testing and assessment and being able to figure out, like, okay, what is going on right now? Because if we don't know what's going on, then it's hard to come up with a solution. And one of the things that I have done is to really try to promote this idea of psychological fortitude, because in the Black community, you know, as Reverend said, talking about mental health isn't really something that happens commonly. And so one of the things that I have tried to do is to shift the conversation to say, okay, how am I doing today? Am I able to, you know, achieve my responsibilities at school, at work, at home? What is my rating on a 0 to 10 basis of my ability to do those things and to withstand the threats, right? Because there are things that happen all the time outside of our control. What is my ability to be able to manage my life on a 0 to 10? So if I'm at a 2 on a 0 to 10 scale, where I'm saying, you know, 0, I'm really having a tough time. I'd at least like to get to a 6. Okay, what are the things that are keeping me from getting to a 6? What are the things that I need to be doing differently in order to achieve that 6? Now, I want to say 6 is a low bar, but it's all relative, right? So we don't have to have perfection. We just need to be able to assess where we are and make the appropriate adjustments so that we are in fact achieving, you know, as best that we can in our day-to-day life.
So powerful. Thank you so much. I have some more questions I would love to ask about your work and your advice, and we'll get back to opening up that conversation in a few minutes. Dr. Andrea Letamendi, as the acting director of the UCLA Resilience Center and also the host of the Arkham Sessions podcast, you bring a wonderful and unique sensibility of both evidence-based psychology and fun to your work. And that's what the Pop Culture Hero Coalition does, and why we're so honored to have you as one of our curriculum creators. Tell me about your journey in learning resilience and in bringing it through pop culture stories to kids, teens, and adults.
I first have to say that, you know, one of the most common questions I get as a consultant to our UCLA faculty, staff, professors, students is, how are we getting through this? What can we do to build resilience? And I want to name that what we're doing tonight is the first step. We're coming together, holding space, holding dialogue, being open, being vulnerable. These are the first steps around resilience and community building. And this ties back to my childhood growing up. I definitely struggled. I struggled with belongingness. I struggled with finding community. As a mixed Latinx Asian child, I sort of didn't really find friends that I could connect to right away. And it was through pop culture that I found that sense of belongingness, that I found my community, and then I could sort of see myself in these stories. And I learned that storytelling was such an important part of our mental health journey. And as that evolved, I also learned that, you know, as a psychologist, as someone who's now in the position of guiding, supporting, teaching, you know, there's a scholarly aspect to this as well as a healing aspect. There are such important connections between our sense of belongingness, our mental health, and where we're finding those connections. And I just want to uplift that, you know, again, what we're doing tonight, building community around, you know, through media, but around these connections with fictional characters is, you know, pivotal for some people to find that sense of healthy mental well-being. I do want to note that another important factor here is the timing of this discussion. We are now a year into this pandemic, and this has been an endurance test for all of us for many reasons. my field, other psychologists in this field have cautioned us. They've said that yes, we may be soon going back into a world that we knew before, but to be prepared for a second wave, a pandemic around mental health, we should anticipate that many of us will continue to struggle, feeling isolated, thwarted belongingness, increased anxiety, and we should be prepared, especially for young people, continuing to find their sense of self, their identity, their community. And I welcome people to think about this second wave and to be incredibly critical around how we are addressing this sense of resilience. I acknowledge and agree that resilience is an amazing area of study, an area of understanding coping, and it is not just bouncing back. I think that the term bouncing back implies an ease, or we can just kind of jump back into being ready or being healthy. I often, when I speak with UCLA students and with professors around resilience building, I talk about other concepts, maybe not bouncing back, but sometimes battling back. How are we arming ourselves, preparing ourselves, really digging into our resources to face these struggles and these threats, as Dr. Walker was implying, these threats that many of us are experiencing. And I think that certainly as we prepare ourselves for this next wave, these conversations are helping us to build that readiness. I do want to talk about the RISE Center. We actually put a task force together at UCLA and noted that many young people were presenting with many considerable mental health concerns, including sleep disturbance, anxiety, depression. And, the one aspect that we know about our younger generation is they are help seeking. They would like to learn and empower themselves. And the Resilience Center at UCLA emerged as a response to these needs. Let's provide a wellness hub, a place where young people can gather, build community, have dialogue, civic engagement. And then the pandemic hit almost immediately after our center was built. But then we kind of shifted into our own resilience. This was like resilience in real life. How are we going to shift our perspective, build new resources? And we used digital wellness tools, we used technology, we used social media, and we transformed our Resilience Center to a virtual Resilience Center. And although we continue to be in a period of transformation and uncertainty, we have learned that young people are willing to engage around their wellness and mental health this way, that we are putting them in the positions of being empowered and having voice and having visibility. And in a way, this also breaks down many of the barriers around equity. We are providing resources and opportunities for growth for all of our communities. And we ensure that all of our communities can access those resources.
So powerfully said. Thank you so much, Dr. Andrea Letamendi. I loved how you said that you were developing a hub, and that is one thing that the coalition is trying to do, is creating free and accessible and relatable mental health resources for everyone to be accessible to them at all times when they need. In mental health being a second pandemic, I would also like to add that it's also the original pandemic, because mental health issues are what has led to depression, anxiety, loneliness, fear, racism, racial violence. All of these issues are steeped in mental health issues. And one thing that I have learned from Dr. Janina Scarlett, who's our next speaker, is the only way out is through. In ignoring our mental health crisis in this country and in the world, we only put off the healing that needs to happen, and we make matters worse. So it's wonderful to have this conversation with you, where we realize that just as we are able to harness tools to help us navigate the pandemic, physical distancing, masks,
wise choices, there are also wise choices that we can make for our own mental health and those around us, and tools that we can use to learn and to change our own lives and each other's. So thank you so much for weighing in on all of that, Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Dr. Janina Scarlett, as someone who came to this country as a 12-year-old refugee, speaking no English, fleeing not only Chernobyl, but also fleeing anti-Semitism, you are a superhero in the field of resilience. Resilience is definitely your superpower, and we love to watch you wearing your cape and sharing the healing that you have experienced. You have a truly magical story of coming through trauma and resilience, and I would love for you to share that with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chase. I am incredibly honored to be here along with all of you today. Dr. Walker, Dr. Letamendi, Chase, Carrie, all of you. I'm just incredibly humbled to be here. And something I've noticed in my study of fictional heroes is that every hero, whether we're looking at Batman or whether we're looking at Black Widow, every hero has an origin story. But the origin story is just the beginning. And every single person I have ever met has an origin story of their own. And so as Chase mentioned, my origin story did begin in Ukraine. At the age of 3, my family and I were exposed to radiation. And, you know, I was expecting some kind of spidey senses or Hulk-like, you know, strength or some kind of healing abilities. But in my case, I spent most of my childhood in and out of hospitals and will for the rest of my life have lifelong health implications. And unfortunately, my family and I were exposed to a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism and violence, causing us to flee as refugees in secret to the United States. And I was 12 when my family and I moved to the United States. I don't know if any of you remember being 12 and being in 7th grade. You know, I usually joke that we need to start some kind of an I survived 7th grade support group, you know, when we're a little bit older than that. But in my case, I think like in the case of a lot of people who go through middle school, I was severely bullied. I was that weird, awkward kid that didn't speak English, that didn't know the American culture, that didn't know how to dress and what to say and where to go. And so I was singled out. But the truth is, what made that year the most challenging year of my life wasn't the bullying. It was that I thought I was alone. No one talked about mental health in my middle school. So I thought I was the only one going through depression. I thought I was the only one having panic attacks, but I didn't know what panic attacks were. I thought I was the only one waking in the middle of the night from nightmares and being terrified that someone was going to hurt me based on the traumatic experiences I went through in Ukraine. And it wasn't until several years later that I saw a movie that forever changed my life. And that movie was The X-Men. So in case you're not familiar, the X-Men are these superheroes or mutants, right? They all have some kind of a genetic mutation. But what's really cool about the X-Men is that every single one of them has a mutation for which they were bullied and ostracized. And I felt like I was watching myself on the screen. I've never seen anything like it, where I felt like I could relate to every character on the screen. But the character that blew my mind and immediately became my favorite superhero of all time was Storm. Because Storm has this unique ability to control the weather. And ever since Chernobyl, my weather was always, my health was always controlled by the weather. And seeing Storm on the screen just clicked something for me. And it made me realize that we are not the victim of our origin story. We are the survivors of it. And in that moment, I realized that every single one has an origin story of our own, just like some of the heroes that we watch on the screen. But every one of us has a choice as to how to use that origin story as a jumping off point. And as I was looking around this completely full movie theater, what I realized was this: the X-Men movie was made, it was really popular, it was sold out because every person that attended that movie theater has also felt alone. And what I realized in that moment is that every single one of us feels alone, like we don't quite fit in, like we don't quite belong. And that is the most unifying factor of them all. We all struggle and we all think that we're alone. And that in itself is a fallacy. We're told that we need to conceal, don't feel, but as we know from Queen Elsa, that just doesn't work. And in fact, very much as Dr. Letamendi was saying, us connecting together is that step toward resilience. Like Dr. Walker was saying, resilience is not necessarily just bouncing back, right? It's about recognizing how we can make a choice to do what's really important to us. Now, sometimes we just get up and go to work or go to school, and that's great. But there are days when we can't even get out of bed. There are days we might have to fight 5 dragons just to get out of bed. And by those, I mean our anxiety, our depression, our chronic illness. Now, if you're fighting 5 dragons with one hand and typing up your report with your other hand, then it makes sense that that report might be a little bit clumsy and might take you a little bit longer to complete than had you not been fighting those dragons. And what I want to add is this. There is this hormone that our body produces called cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And cortisol is highest in the morning, and then it lowers throughout the day. Now, we just said cortisol is a stress hormone, and we said it's highest in the morning. So what does that mean? It means that waking up in the morning and getting out of bed is literally the most stressful thing you're going to do all day. So if you've already done it, congratulations. You've already done the most stressful thing. You're already a superhero. And if you haven't, if you need a little bit more time to battle your dragons, if you need an extra few minutes or an extra hour or maybe even a few more days to work on your mental health, you're not being lazy. You're being wise. You're taking time to recharge yourself so that you have the energy that you need to get back out there and help not only yourself, but to help your community. So my hope is that each and every one of you remembers that there's a superhero in you. And what you're going through right now, this is your origin story. But the rest is up to you. So thank you. And please keep superheroing and don't forget your cape.
Thank you so much, Janina. And it's just wonderful to hear your personal stories of strength and how that has led you to your doctorate in neuroscience and psychology, and the wealth of understanding that all 3 of you have brought to this, Dr. Walker, Dr. Letamendi, and Dr. Scarlett, is truly exciting. I want to ask you for some brass tacks tools, right? Because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we all have the ability to freak out. And we all have the ability to grab onto tools and to make our lives better instead of worse during a moment of crisis. So I'd love for each of you to tell us, and we do want to stay on schedule for our next 2 speakers, but I do want to hear from you. What do we do in the moment when we find ourselves at a moment of crisis and either make our lives better or worse, and the lives of all of those around us? Give us some tools that we can hang on to help.
Well, one thing I'd like to, I'll jump in briefly. That is, we have to prepare for war in the time of peace, as my dad used to say. And so what that means is having the toolkit prepared now. So I'm glad we're having this conversation so that as soon as everyone logs off, if they don't already have their toolkit, they can go ahead and get that together. But it varies for every individual person. So for some people, maybe it is music, so creating their favorite playlist, because when you're in that stressful moment, it is really hard to come up with a plan to kind of de-escalate things. But sometimes, and I know everybody has their favorite song, that song comes on and you just get to moving and you forget about everything that's happening around you. For other people, we get in our heads a lot. And because we're in our heads thinking about stressful things over and over again, we think that's what we're supposed to do because then we can problem solve, but that's not really how it works. And when we're stressed out about something that we're ruminating over essentially, and we keep thinking about it, it's good to write that thing down, whatever it might be. And so we don't have to problem solve it, just write it down. And we are oftentimes surprised how often just writing something down will just give us some more clarity of mind because we've freed ourselves up. And then the last thing is pretty simple, but only works when there is nice weather. And that is just literally stepping outside for a couple minutes. It's not fancy. It's not sophisticated. It's literally just stepping outside. And I'm not even saying go for a 15 or 30-minute walk. I'm just saying change your perspective. And changing the perspective can get us really out of a rut sometimes. So I'll stop with those three.
I love that. I love those suggestions, Dr. Walker, and I can personally attest to they really do work. Some additional ones I'd like to add. Some of my favorites are the hand on heart and unwind technique. So a lot of times when we're in our mind, when we're in our head a lot, our body tenses up too. And so as we become more tense, we start getting more stressed out. We get more of that hormone cortisol that we were just talking about. The hand on heart is a way that we can give ourselves a little mini hug. So by placing your hand on your heart center, we're giving ourselves a little hug, which releases this special hormone called oxytocin. It's my favorite hormone in the whole world. It's the cuddle hormone. It can alleviate stress and make us feel better in a really challenging moment. The unwind technique is where we notice different places where we hold our tension in our body. For example, we might be maybe crunching our forehead or clenching our jaw or tensing our shoulders, or we might feel tension in our chest or stomach. As we have the hand on our heart, we can notice each part separately and imagine that part of our body unwinding, almost like a lotus flower opening up as we take 5 breaths. For example, we can take 5 breaths and relax our forehead, after which we can take 5 breaths and relax our jaw, all with the hand on our heart, then shoulders, our chest, and our stomach. All of these can reduce some of the stress chemicals in our body and allow us to feel a little bit more settled in those moments of distress.
Bring it home, Dr. Letamendi. Thank you so much.
So much to say. I can offer a couple of recommendations for starting with psychological distancing. We've been talking about social distancing for a while. Let's talk about psychological distancing. This is our ability to utilize our mental coping capacities. And some of this comes from liberation psychology. The fact that some of us are experiencing so many stressors that we become overwhelmed. The system becomes exhausted. At times we need to do a check-in, and we can all do this at any time. Provide yourself a check-in, and you're asking yourself in the moment, what is this pain? So this is a cognitive skill, right? What is this pain that I'm feeling? Is this turmoil? Is this sadness? Is it mental fatigue? Second, where is this pain? A lot of us have pain throughout our bodies, and maybe our bodies are trying to send a signal. So where is this pain? And then how bad is this pain? 1 to 10. Give yourself a moment to provide self-compassion, because at times this is a mental health emergency. We need to attend to high-rated turmoil and psychic, right? If it's not a mental health emergency, then we can employ some of these resilience tools that are ready for us, and that we can employ with autonomy, with self-efficacy. We can, access our resources online, our community, our social supports. That's when we can address those particular resources. Finally, if you're in the position to model this, maybe you're a leader, maybe you're here taking notes, grabbing information, hoping to disseminate to your community. What I'm sharing most is be authentic. We make mistakes. I'm a professor, I'm a psychologist. Throughout the pandemic, I've been a mess. And I'm okay saying to my students, to my colleagues, yeah, I don't got it together. And I hope that as we talk about resilience, we can stress that being resilient is not being indestructible, that we can have faults, that we can make mistakes, that we can show our vulnerability in order to model for others, for our students, our mentees, our community, that's a part of the human experience, and that we're here for one another.
So beautiful, so powerful. Thank you all so very, very much. Dr. Andrea Letamendi, Dr. Janina Scarlett, and Dr. Rita Walker. It's been an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We are extremely honored and proud to have our next speaker with us. Amanda Nguyen is a civil rights activist and the CEO and founder of RISE, Civil Rights Organization. She championed the proposal and drafting of the Sexual Assault Survivors' Rights Act, the 21st bill in modern US history to pass unanimously through Congress. Nguyen was nominated for the 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. She received the 24th Annual Heinz Award in Public Policy, was named to Time 100's Next list and the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and she received the Nelson Mandela Changemaker Award. It is such an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining us, Amanda Nguyen.
Of course. I am so glad to be here, and just being able to have a sneak peek of what everybody else said earlier. I just want to thank you for putting this on, creating this community and space. It is so needed within this time. You know, I'll just talk a little bit about activism and then the importance of self-care and sustainability through it, because I think we are only as healthy, the movement is only as healthy as we are. And to do that, I'll tell some stories. So the first time that I talked about my civil rights, I went to politicians and I told them, I'm a rape survivor, I am fighting for my rights, and could you please help me by doing your jobs? Could you please help me pen my civil rights into existence by sponsoring the civil rights bill? I did it for 6 hours and it was brutal. People were very honest and told me, hey, this is not going to help me with my reelection. I'm sympathetic to your assault, but this is not going to play well with my constituents. They don't know me for this. This isn't a priority issue. And I went home and I cried. And I just remember being like, oh, I just need someone to tell me that they love me. And the next morning, as a pathological optimist, I woke up and I went straight into the United States Senate. And in my Uber ride to the Senate, I met a man who was kind of intimidating, kind of stoic, didn't really talk to me. He's the driver of the car. And at the end, he saw that I was going to the Senate. So he asked me why, and I told him. And this once intimidating man started crying, his tears welling out of his eyes. And he said, my daughter is also a rape survivor. And she went through a lot of similar things that you went through. And when he stopped the car, he said, can I shake your hand? Thank you so much for fighting for my daughter. Has anyone told you that they love you today? I love you. And I'll never forget that dad. And I think this is our story. It's a collective story of progress. There is a tradition of people taking their painful living truths and channeling that into justice. I joined that tradition by penning my own rights into existence. And more importantly, I'm training other people how to do that too. And, you know, I think that there are so many moments, especially in this pandemic, where we may feel like our agency is limited, you know, and that our access to democracy may be only limited to either voting or marching. But what I want to let people know is that you have a constitutional right to petition the government, that this American experiment really is, well, up to you to define what a more perfect union means. And that no one is powerless when we come together, and no one is invisible when we demand to be seen. You know, I still remember the first law. I got a call from one of the senior advisors, and she said, I'm so sorry, the Speaker of the House is not bringing it up for a vote. It's going to die. And I was devastated. That this law was not the federal one, it was a state law, Massachusetts. And I was living in DC at the time. I was already at the airport. I was about to board the plane to fly to go to Boston to fight for my rights. And I was the last person on that plane. And when I got off the next morning, even our lead sponsor said, hey, I'm so sorry. Like, you know, it's not going to happen. And for 14 hours, what we did was we walked into people's offices and we were authentic. And we said, hey, you know, this is my story. Can we have a moment of your time to tell you why it's so important? And at the end of those 14 hours, the speaker brought it up for a vote and it passed unanimously. And I just hold on to that because there are so many moments where movements ebb and flow. And that father, the fact that our team was able to make it and create history for millions of people, those are moments that let me have hope even in the dark times, because I still wake up every day and the two questions that I have that are burning is, what is my place in the universe and what am I going to do about it? I think both astrophysics and activism answers that question. Side note, I'm a super nerd. Astrophysics is my background, so it's very different from this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I want people to know, one, the most powerful tool we have is our voice. So absolutely speak your truth. And if you have the capacity to, then stand up for what's right. But also know that everyone is on their own journey. Everyone has their own capacity. And so it's okay to take a seat back, actually. There are so many survivors who have said, hey, I feel like I'm not the perfect survivor. Am I supposed to have this journey from victim to hero or something? And you know what? No, I actually really don't like that archetype of a character. I did this for me because justice has different forms for different people. For me, justice was writing laws, but justice can mean many different things. And you are enough. You are enough. So joy is the most radical form of rebellion, and just be happy. That's, at the end of the day, that's what matters. Anyways, thank you so much for including me.
Thanks so much, Amanda. We also want to address the violence that's been happening against the AAPI community. I loved it when you said, if you have the capacity to stand up for what's right, then do that. That's why we're here today. That's why we love these stories. So please let us know your thoughts and how we can help.
It has been the worst form of validation in these past couple of weeks, because for many months, my activist colleagues and organizers have been bearing our souls on television and warning people of the consequence if people didn't stand up. We told people, how many more lives will it take in order for people to take our stories seriously? And I actually found out about the massacre in a live interview where it was like a movie scene. A reporter had said, I'm sorry, we have breaking news. And she was interviewing me about these hate crimes and discrimination, racism. And that we just have reporting in, there has been a mass shooting targeting Asian women. And I'm sorry, there's 2 confirmed dead, no 4, no 6. And without missing a beat, she asked me, do you think there's still progress in light of these deaths? What a question. And it took everything in me to say, yes, there's still progress, because what other option do we have than to keep fighting? And so to explain a little bit about why I think we're in the moment we're in now, AAPIs have been structurally erased from systems that hold power. Those systems are our empathy machines, they're storytelling systems. So those systems include our federal government. In 2009, there was a study that federal agencies don't even include Asians within their definition of racial minorities. That is absurd. Many schools don't teach our history, education. It's so important. People always say, learn from your past, right? Well, what if your past was erased? Another structure is Hollywood. The stories that we tell, they're so important. They shape the stereotypes that are abounded. China doll or vixen or dragon lady, all of these things are at play, especially in the last massacre that happened. And finally, the mainstream media. So it's so critical that we practice responsible journalism. And of course, it's not only the journalists, but it's also the producers, the decision makers, right? So it's people in all different levels who must recognize that in order for us to truly be more equitable, we must consider how to include all communities, and Asian Americans are part of that. I don't think there has been an Asian American who hasn't had the question asked to them, where are you from? No, really, where are you from? And even though it might seem like an innocent question, at the root of it is the idea of the perpetual foreigner, that you don't belong. So for folks who are interested in figuring out how to help in this moment, there are incredible grassroots organizations that have been doing this work. You can, if you are in one of these cities, I urge you to Google and find out what your local community organizers are doing. But on top of that, you can absolutely support Asian businesses, eat, or order takeout from your favorite Asian restaurants. If you have Asian friends in your life, reach out to them. You can say with empathy and full acknowledgement, hey, I don't understand what you're going through right now, but I just want to let you know I'm here for you. What can I do for you at this moment? Because even small things like that means so much. And if you're interested in volunteering, my organization Rise is organizing on the ground. And so you can check us out at risenow.us.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Truly, truly wonderful to have you here. We truly appreciate your taking the time and all of your incredibly powerful wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are so excited to have our final speaker who just popped into view. She stole the planet's heart with her iconic portrayal of Tahani on The Good Place and now stars with Impractical Jokers on The Misery Index. She's the founder of iWay, a community that believes in and practices radical inclusivity, tackling toxic diet culture, and practices brick by brick activism to change the narrative of our society. Thank you so much for joining us. We love you, Jameela Jamil.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Is the sound okay?
If you'd like to make it a little louder, you could.
I'm softly spoken and English, and I have headphones because I am.
Just about. Hello. Okay, there we go. Do you prefer this? Is this better for you?
So, thank you.
Great. And also they just look so great. Don't you agree? They're just really doing it for my outfit. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate what you've put together today, and I've loved the stories of everyone who came before, and I'm going to try my best to not repeat any of the points that have already been made. This is the thing about being the final speaker of the day, is that you watch people after person say amazing thing after the amazing thing. And so I think from my own experience, just to give people some context, I'm someone who has both privately and publicly struggled with my mental health for my whole life, pretty much. As long as I can remember, I have had depression and anxiety. I was raised in a household full of people who had severe mental illness, and they were members of my immediate family, my extended family. Everywhere I looked, there was someone struggling with anything from manic depression to bipolar to schizophrenia. And very young, I was put in a carer position where I would have to look after these people, and I was kind of burdened, I think is the right word to use if you're only 9 years old, with the job of cheering everyone up. So that kind of set a pattern for me in my entire life, to think that just because I'm not as overtly or obviously mentally unwell as the people around me, that my mental health isn't a priority. And I was taught to never, ever prioritize my own well-being. That is also very consistent with women in general, in particular women of color, that we are the nurturers. We are the ones who are supposed to put down all of our problems to make sure that everyone else is okay. And so that was very much so my pattern. And because of that, I missed all these symptoms of anxiety, depression, anorexia, all of these different things that I desperately needed help and support with. I missed them because I was so busy worrying about everyone else around me. And I finally burnt out, and at 26 years old, had a full nervous breakdown. And without meaning to trigger anyone, I had a suicide attempt, which was the second one I'd ever made in my life. And I was only 26. So that set me off on a journey to recovery. And the last 9 years of my life have been a kind of crash dummy test experiment to see how I could maybe save my own life, to make sure that I can find a way to stay here in this world. And one of the biggest takeaways I've had, there are many lessons I've learned over the course of those years, is that when it comes to the idea of resilience, I think that we think of it as stoicism. we think of resilience as a type of bravery, as being able to withstand any kind of storm. And I really passionately want people to understand that that is false, and that resilience doesn't mean you are unbreakable. Resilience means that you are kind of going against. Resilience is very admirable, but I also don't want it to become so, oh, that's my dog not being very resilient, sorry. Resilience is something that I want people to understand doesn't last forever. And it's not possible, it's not sustainable to keep it up forever. And I think that the key to long-standing sustainable resilience is preventative care. I want people to know that it's okay to look after yourself first. In an aeroplane, when they are explaining all the safety measures to you, they always say to you that you should make sure that you've put your own mask on in the event of an emergency before you put a mask on anyone else. And that stands true for mental illness and mental health care and mental well-being and stability. You need to make sure that you are okay and that your cup is full before you go on to try and help others. I think that that's incredibly important, and messaging I really want people to understand. I think selfishness or self-serving has been given a bad rep. And again, in particular for women, we are not expected to ever take that time. And whenever we have self-care kind of marketed towards us, it's always in the form of a face mask or a spa day or something that's actually going to make us look more attractive for those around us. So that self-care is designed to really just please everyone else. I, instead, after my nervous breakdown 9 years ago, decided I was going to stop spending money on my outside. I was going to start spending any money I had on my inside, and started saving up towards therapy or days off or mini breaks just by myself. I started to fund my mental health care because that is the single greatest investment you will ever make in your entire life. I started to say no more often. I started to create boundaries. I started to think about, who am I following online? What publications am I looking at? What companies am I seeing in front of me and surrounding myself with? How do I learn self-defense of the mind? We hear about self-defense of the physicality, but we don't think about how to protect the most important organ in our entire bodies, which is our mind. And so on this journey to true sustainable resilience and to true happiness, which is still an incremental process that gets challenged all the time, I think the key of saying no to certain things, saying no to certain people, distancing yourself from toxicity, and understanding that the greatest detox you can do is a digital and social one where you feel harmed and worse about yourself via the people and things that you are surrounded by. Sorry about my dog. He is a very feisty puppy. And so those are just the things that I most want to impart, is that don't be afraid to be selfish. Don't ever try to fund things that will please other people. Always fund your own well-being first. Don't be afraid to say the word no. And the more you fill your cup and the more you help yourself and build yourself back up, and the sturdier you make yourself, the more you will be able to help those around you in the long term.
So beautiful, so powerful. Your story of post-traumatic growth and resilience is incredibly inspiring. And I just want to express huge respect for you in that you have been open and helped to widely break the stigma of mental health issues. We all go through them. And I want us to, while we're all here, to really speak to the audience and say, we stand with you in your knowledge that you are not alone in your mental health issues and that there is life ahead. And I can say, Jameela, I think there are quite a few of us who are very glad you're still here, and the incredible work. Thank you. The incredible work that you do on screen and off with iWay is so beautiful. Do you want to weigh in a bit on iWay, because that's such a powerful community? We'd love to hear more.
Yes, iWay is a mental health movement, and it is a movement against shame and stigma. And so we talk about all different things that can impact your mental health. And we also are an allyship platform. We're in a time in the world where a lot of people are waking up to the idea and to the realization that they don't actually know very much about other communities, especially ones that don't look like them, and they want to help, but they don't know where to start. And we live in a somewhat punishing society that doesn't make it very easy or welcoming for you to start, because you're expected to have all of the answers as soon as you begin your journey. Now, I don't think that, again, speaking of sustainability, that is a logical solution to encouraging people to understand we are all just products of our own environment. So what I Weigh has become via our YouTube channel, our website, our Instagram, and now our podcast is an education platform, so that we won't make you feel judged for wherever you're at in your knowledge about allyship. We're just so excited that you're there. And I'm ignorant, I have a lot to learn, and I learn publicly from incredible experts that I'm very lucky to access. And the community is able to learn alongside me. And we have almost 1.5 million followers and hundreds of thousands of podcast listeners, all of whom are dedicated to learning more every single day. And kind of like my show, The Good Place, the premise of the show was just try to be better tomorrow than you were today, and put your differences aside as human beings to get to a better place together. And so I think I Weigh kind of accidentally embodies that.
So wonderful. So truly wonderful. I Weigh having this incredible intersection between honesty and just rich, radical openness, and cherishing each person's ability to be exactly who they are. And in that, it's fun. And a few minutes ago, Amanda Nguyen said joy is the most radical form of activism. And I just want to just commend you and celebrate with you the joy that you bring to this subject, and to everyone's knowledge that there is life and hope ahead, and that we're not alone.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I agree.
Thank you so much. It's just such a great honor and fun privilege to have you here with us, Jameela Jamil.
Well, thank you for everything you've done, and thank you for having me. Lots of love.
We want to say a special shout out to our sponsor, BeKindMerch.org, which makes all of Superhero IRL's programs in schools, LGBTQIA+ centers, and online possible. It's obviously a crucial message. Please go to BeKindMerch.org and support. The bottom line with all of this is that you're not alone. And there is healing ahead, no matter what you've been through. You've heard a lot of hard stories today, but you can find your superpowers of resilience, self-compassion, healthy identity, and everything else you need. We stand with you to contend for yourselves and for each other. You're stronger than you know, and it's okay to ask for help. Reach out to us online. We love you 3000. Special thanks to everybody at Comic-Con, especially the amazing programming team. We love you. Thanks.